Hello there, and welcome to the fourth Creating Abundance Collaborative Town Hall. Today, we're talking about how young people are making an impact with youth organizing and movement making through creative youth development. Before we jump in, we want to highlight our youth host, Love Eden. Love Eden is a rising senior at DuPont Manual's Youth Performing Arts School, majoring in musical theater. She's passionate about advocacy and has always used performance to raise awareness and drive change in her community. She's also representing Hip Hop into Learning, HHN2L, and the Real Young Prodigies. We'll dive right in as Love shares some details with the live attendees and introduces our next speaker.
We will send a follow-up email with the event recording, key takeaways, additional resources, and a feedback survey. Closed captioning is available, so please enable it if needed. Okay, that's it. Is everyone ready? I will be introducing the first person, who is Alexis Jackson. I am thrilled to introduce you to Alexis Jackson, our data analysis officer with the Lewis Prize for Music. She's going to share some research on CYD and youth organizing. Thanks for being here, Alexis.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, hello, everybody. Again, I'm Alexis Jackson with the Lewis Prize. I'm so happy to be here and just to share some information with you about how the Lewis Prize is really looking into and working with youth movement building as one of our stronger impact indicators for creative youth development organizations. I want to start by just really highlighting that we recognize that creative youth development and movement building for young people are intrinsically linked. Before the term creative youth development or CYD was introduced, artists, community leaders, and community organizations have been using the arts as a means to support young people's movements in their communities for decades and decades. And those values and practices of CYD come from intergenerational and culturally specific legacy entities working at the intersections of culture, policy, spirituality, movement building, and direct services. Some of the images here on the screen really highlight some of those historical references to spiritual and cultural spaces, social and benevolent societies, community arts and activist organizations, and legacy arts organizations that have had a long connection to youth movement building around Black lives, Indigenous lives, the Chicano arts movement, and so much more. I'm going to go to the next slide. For the Lewis Prize, we first identified youth movement building as an impact indicator during our 2021 COVID report, Midcasting for Just Futures. There we surveyed over 270 CYD organizations on how they were best supporting young people during the pandemic. That led us to identify youth movement building as one of 5 key integral impact points that we call the nexus of systems change. Of those supporting youth movement building, over 2/3 of those respondents identified uplifting leadership and directly supporting youth movement building around the March for Black Lives and the movement for health during the pandemic as well. Since then, we've worked with our grantees to really better understand what this looks like and how to best support it. All of our accelerator awardees are working on youth movement building with the main focus of those movements being racial justice movements and cultural preservation movements. This is shown up in programming or in the theory of how they're working with young people. Many organizations were actually built from working with youth-led movements in their communities that then formed into structured CYD spaces. That also looks like directly supporting and facilitating leadership with young people as they're moving through how are they going to work with their communities and youth movement building. This also has led to expanding partnerships in the communities, really deepening and widening the impact. And most importantly, they're directly serving the needs of their participants by supporting their youth and movement building in their communities. So in conclusion, CYD spaces make space for imagination, depth of curiosity, and a range of artistic exposures, all of which are fundamental to the work of dreaming and manifesting more just communities. Their support of young people in organizing around community movements are more likely to engage in tactics towards transformative systems change through their work than other organizations. So that's why we here at the Lewis Prize really support youth movement building and really want to identify and recognize it as one of the more important aspects of this really important and transformative arts education. So thank you. And I don't know who's next, but I'll pass it on.
Thank you, Alexis. That's really great. I love how you support the youth in so many different ways. That's just so inspirational. All right, next up, I want to talk about my group and what I'm here doing. In my hometown of Louisville, Kentucky, I am a part of a performance group called the Real Young Prodigies with the organization HHN2L, Hip Hop into Learning. We make music and videos about things we care about in hopes of inspiring people's hearts and minds and making real change. This summer, we made a video about the busing situation because the school district has cut a lot of busing routes due to the lack of bus drivers. And many of us don't have buses to get to school, and we wanted to do something to bring attention to the issue. Our video has been seen nationally on CNN and has over 63,000 views on YouTube. Most importantly, it's starting to spark change. Let's watch a little bit of the video now. Here we go.
Where's my bus? I'm trying to get to my destination. Dropping a block, hesitate. Been up since 5, I'm done with waiting. I need a lift, I need an Uber, I need a charge. Hey, I'm on a scooter. Who gon' look after my brothers and sisters? We don't get around, they told us to move her. I'm a good kid, I stay in class too. Teachers want me to succeed, but I can't get to school. It's all on the news, but I don't wanna fuss. Don't got no money job, hold on, let me whip the bus. Where my bus at? I just need to wait. So where my bus at? Where my bus at? So where my bus at? I need transportation. So where my bus at? I wish that it was back like it was before. But I miss it when the bus came straight to my door. I wish that it was back like it was before. Tell me that the bus can't pick up no more. Oh man, no. Where my bus at? It went away quick like Snapchat. Shoes on with my backpack. I was trying to catch that. We on the bus go round and round. Can't get a scoop from across the town. On the main street, cruising down. The bus went. I missed that sound. Where my bus at? Where my bus at? I just need to wait. So where my bus at? Where my bus at? So where my bus at? I need transportation. So where my bus at? I wish that it was back like it was before. But I miss it when the bus came straight to my door. I wish that it was back like it was before. Tell me that the bus can't pick up no more. Oh man, no. I've been looking, where it at? Where it at? Where it at? Gotta keep looking, where it at? Where it at? Where it at? I've been looking, where it at? Where it at? Where it at? Gotta keep looking.
Wow. Thank you all so much for watching that with us. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did making it. All right, next up we have Carolyn DeWitt. Now I want you to meet Carolyn DeWitt. She is a president and executive director of Rock the Vote. Their mission is to inspire young people to get involved in the democratic process. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thanks, love. Thanks, Shanika and Anne and Dan and Deluge and everyone for the opportunity. And it's really hard to follow up with that video, isn't it? That was amazing. I know I got goosebumps. So thank you. Yes, President of Rock the Vote. For those who do not know about Rock the Vote, we are a nonpartisan nonprofit dedicated to building the political power of young people. And we do that through voter registration, education, and mobilization, and through protecting young people's right to vote. We were actually born out of the music industry. On the right there, the censorship is un-American was our first campaign. We reach young people where they are through cultural touch points with with trusted messengers, with information on social media, through brands they know, through musicians they know, through a whole bunch of different avenues, because we've had to evolve as the technology and media landscape have had to evolve. So why do we focus on young people? I'm going to get a little academic here, but since 18-year-olds got the right to vote, young people have turned out at rates 20 to 30 points lower than older voters in every presidential election. In midterms and in local elections, this is even greater. So what we're looking at right now, the top darker blue line is voters over the age of 30, and the lighter blue line are voters under the age of 30 and their turnout in presidential elections. As you can see, so what happens is every youth generation is told that they're the problem generation, that they're not showing up. But this tells us this is a systematic problem that we have. We do very little to prepare young people to exercise their power, to understand their power when they turn 18. What this results in is a generation over and over of youth generations that don't have representation in our government, which is really problematic when you think about how the youth generation has been changing, becoming more diverse. There are more youth that identify as queer than previous generations, and so on and so forth. And so their views aren't getting implemented into the policies that are being made. What we do at Rock the Vote, and I know we'll get to kind of this year's obviously a very busy time for us, and we do a lot of extra work in federal election years, but we also do year-round work. So we work with high schools with after-school programs. The background here is we have explainers on topics people want to know about, but we also know that when young people are taught about voting in elections, they turn out at 40% more likely to actually vote in elections. So we have a program called Democracy Class. And we know that when young people are taught, which there's increasingly more education around Gen Z, that they turn out. So young people, specifically Gen Z, has been breaking turnout records in 2018, 2020, 2022, and we're hopeful for 2024 as well. But there's still a lot of work to do. And what we've actually seen is a backlash of states realizing that young people are showing up and making it harder for them to vote with things like ID laws and moving polling places off college campuses. For those who do work with youth, or you might have heard that there are 41 million members of Gen Z who are eligible to vote in this election, which is huge. When you think about how many votes decided the 2020 election, that was about 45,000, less than 45,000. So youth really have the power to decide where our country is going, where our communities are, because a lot of state and local elections are decided by even fewer votes than that. So one thing I do want to show as a resource that we have, I don't know if you can play the video, Shanika, but on our website, rockthevote.org, we have a ton of resources for, quite frankly, any voter, but is really designed for a new voter. We have what's called our election center, because we know that every state has different deadlines, different policies, that we break it down and try and make it as easy as possible. We have a lot of tools, including being able to register to vote, check your registration status, look up who and what are on your ballot and identify what endorsements they have to try and find out who's aligned with your values. So I just wanted to provide that out for you all as voters, but also to share with your network. And then finally, I just want to say thank you so much for having us. Cool.
Thanks for sharing, Carolyn. I believe with my whole heart that voting is so important. And as a young person myself, I just love the work Rock the Vote does. So thank you for coming and thank you for sharing. If people have any questions for Carolyn, please drop them in the chat. And I will be repeating that ever so often. So please remember that. All right. Next up, I am pleased to introduce you to Monica Cordova, Executive Director of the Founders Collaborative for Youth Organizing. Hello, Monica. Monica.
Hello, everybody. Monica Cordova, she, her, hers. Happy to be here, coming to y'all from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and just so eager to be invited to this conversation. Both to talk to a bunch of folks in this webinar space that I've never met before and have such amazing panelists by my side. So I want to share first a little bit about the Funders Collaborative on Youth Organizing. So FCYO, some folks may know of, and some folks, this may be your first time hearing about us. We are a funder, intermediary, and capacity builder for the field of youth organizing, which is a really wonky way of saying we try to really support local grassroots, community-based organizations that are led by young people or are working intergenerationally to ensure that young people have the power to really move forward the type of change they see necessary in their communities. And we have a strong emphasis on power building. And I'll talk a little bit more later about what that means. But the ways we do this is both about moving money, about bringing groups together to make sure they're not alone in this work, moving more resources to organizations doing this work, building knowledge. There's a lot of research on our website, and many, many more things. I'm going to keep going to give you a little bit more of a window. We do about $6 million in grant making a year. Next year will be our 25th anniversary. And we've really kind of bridged over this gap of funding over 100 organizations a year. The unique thing about us as an organization is our board is made up of both philanthropic institutions and grassroots organizers. And we really think that's critical to building the kind of strategies necessary to meet this moment. Now, some of you, maybe this is the first time you've ever heard the word youth organizing. And many of you are probably familiar with organizing, but like, what is the distinction? I'm going to start with just a little bit of a story about how I became involved in organizing. So I'm a product of the organizing pipeline. I got involved when I was young, when I was in middle school. I guess I wouldn't say embarrassed to say, but my motivation as a 12-year-old was really, I had a crush. And there was a local neighborhood organization that was organizing young people to get engaged in their community. And that was my first motivating factor. After that, I found the most gorgeous space that really invested in me as a young woman of color and believed in my leadership as an individual, but also understood the impact that we collectively could make on our own community. And so I was fortunate to find many mentors and other young people who were really passionate about systems change and, took our work to the state legislature, met with elected officials, and were able really to galvanize more community support behind our efforts that connected to environmental justice and education justice. So, and it's led me to here many, many, many years later. But what is organizing, youth organizing? As mentioned before, young people have been at the forefront of social movements for generations. Young people really actually galvanizing the type of change that's necessary in our society is nothing new. But what did happen that was slightly different in the 1990s and the early 2000s was there was a crop of policies that were coming about that were really targeting young people, and in particular, young people of color. And this meant, I know in my town in Albuquerque, New Mexico, there were things like attempting to institute a youth curfew or bans on cruising, or you couldn't walk in the mall with more than 2 other friends because if there were 4 of you, were considered a gang. So there was an environment that was really targeting young people as a group of, as a targeted group who then began to organize a constituency. This is really where a lot of the research was coming about, also about positive youth development and its impacts on young people. And then, the rise of the understanding and knowledge of community organizing in our communities, which led the ground for young people to start organizing other young people and really building institutions, organizations that supported them to do so. And so youth organizing, the way we define it, and you can find this definition, a fuller blowout of this on our website if you're looking for it, is it's about, it's grounded in racial, gender, and economic justice. And it's about engaging young people in the process of building power for systems change while supporting, as I mentioned, right, in my story, their individual and collective development. There are key guiding principles to this. One is engaging youth most impacted by injustice and systems oppression. Another is really supporting the holistic development of young people. That's culturally, that's social emotionally, that's also politically helping them to understand the conditions that they're functioning within. And then next, that it really strengthens intergenerational and intersectional movement building. And so we know to build a strong society that's really engaging all of its community members, we need folks across all generations engaged. And then ultimately, it's shifting power dynamics. One of the things that we really learned through FCYO and our work over the last 25 years is, you know, the depth of the work that young people are putting into shifting and changing society. So if anybody can think back to even just the last decade, the different conditions that young people are functioning within now that are different than any other generation has had to deal with, right? Like you think about active shooter drills, the climate crisis, surviving a global pandemic, the threats to democracy. We can go on and on and on about what is happening in society today. And FCO really took it upon ourselves as we began to listen and lean into listening to young organizers on the ground. Like, what can we do to support them and actually building the power that helps transform those conditions in society? And so one of the things that we did was develop the Power to Win framework. And we did this in conjunction and partnership with organizers. And what the Power to Win framework really does is it lays out what are the pillars that help us think about how to build the type of the power we need in this particular moment. The first one is, we talk about it as long-term strategic orientation. And so this is like, if you're starting to enact change in your community, are you building united vision around what is the world that you're trying to build? What is the society you all see together? What is your analysis, your structural analysis of power in your community? And do you all have a similar long-term goal that you're working towards? The second one is transformative leadership development, which really talks about how are we developing our leaders and our members and our organizations? What is the organizing culture that we're trying to really center? What are the avenues in which folks are building leadership up through a leadership ladder? Are there the right types of trainings for folks to develop both socially, politically, emotionally, all of the avenues? And then are there pathways for young people to stay engaged beyond the organizations that they're involved in? The next pillar is organizing for power. Here's where we really talk about the power analysis. How are we building a base of supporters? So for many young people, they're building a base in their schools, but now they've really stretched beyond that to be out actively in their community and really engaging their whole community in systems change work. Launching campaigns. So oftentimes organizing results in policy campaigns and hopefully policy wins. And then thinking about strategic and tactical alliances. So who are the other folks that you need to bring into your social change effort? And sometimes those might look like unlikely partners, but we have to really bring in a wide range of community members and partners to try to address the challenges that we're facing in this moment. And the last we're most excited about is assessment and experimentation. We take, FCL is about joy and rigor, and we take assessment and experimentation seriously. But primarily experimentation. So we want folks within our cohorts and we work with and young people to have the ability to fail. It is in our failures, it is in trying something new and a new approach to changing things in our world that actually we grow the most. And that's what we really see the most in the way we work with the organizations and organizations we do is try something on. And if you fail, then you've learned something. Let's not be afraid of failure. And also trying to help funders to understand how they must fund in bolder and more riskier ways that allow folks to take bolder risks in their work. So that's a little bit about FCYO. Excited to be here and talk more. You can reach out to me if you have other questions, or we also have a field scan that talks about the state of the field on our website and a lot of other resources if folks ever want to check that out. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Monica, for that informative presentation. I feel like young people usually don't know where to start with youth organizing, so the work that you and FCYO does is so amazing and so needed. All right, again, any questions for Monica should go in the chat. Next, I am excited to introduce you to Marley Diaz, author, activist, and producer. Marley, we're so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited. To introduce myself. Hi, everybody. I'm Marley. I am from West Orange, New Jersey. And as you mentioned, I'm the founder of the 1000 Black Girl Books campaign. So I like to tell the work I do around organizing and activism really through a story, because I think, sort of as you'll understand through the main point of what I'm going to say, I don't have visuals. I like to tell stories, but that really organizing and activism and change making is something that can be natural to all of us and comes at the beautiful mix of passion and frustration. So it's not always about knowing that you want to be an activist, or that you would want to run for president, or that you have an aspiration of making some sort of, ending one of the big issues that we see in our world, but really just the idea that you're interested in your community, you're engaged in an issue, you feel passionate about something, and they can sometimes all come together to make this beautiful mix of change in your community and hopefully later in the world. So for me, that started as my passion being reading. I'm an only child, voracious reader. Didn't see, like, you could never tell me go to your room and read as a punishment. I was always excited. And when I got to my fifth grade classroom, I finally got like the coolest teacher in school. And as much as I loved him as an educator, he didn't assign books with Black girls as protagonists. We read a lot of books that mirrored his experiences growing up in the South, hunting with his dogs, learning a lot, doing a lot of like reading about, really getting a mirror slash window into his life, but not really getting to see Black girl stories being reflected. And although I had a home and a library that would provide me with that access, I understood that not only for other Black girls in my classroom, and also those who do not look like me, that not having access to these stories can sometimes suggest that they matter less, or that they don't exist at all. And it can be a dangerous accident. I felt it was unintentional, but I knew that if I brought this up, maybe I could change something in my library, or maybe this is going on other places and it's something I can explore. So this is at 10 years old. I'm not viewing this as I am an organizer, I am an activist. I will now be 19 years old, studying sociology and African American history at Harvard, talking to kids about creative youth organizing, knowing and having all the words to describe these problems, but really trusting my intuition and knowing the importance of asking for help. So my mom and I would have this routine of sitting in a diner and eating pancakes, talking about like my school day. And I complained about the lack of diversity in the books that I was seeing. And she asked me what I was going to do about it. So I decided that I wanted to collect 1,000 books with Black girls as the main character, and donate them to the school that she had attended in Jamaica, along with her mother and her mom's mom. So not only did I want to make sure that I could make change in New Jersey, where I'm from, but recognizing and doing the research, exploring, as we've heard from our other presenters, and really getting the information and knowledge to say that, hey, not only is this a problem in my community, but this is a structural issue of not having Black girl books be assigned in curriculums. So walking it back to kind of breaking our problem out into the way libraries play into it, the way schools play into it, the way curriculum writers play into it, students, educators, and so on. And once I got this larger understanding, I felt this very deep call to action, to say that telling Black girl stories matters. And that my work, although it is focused on telling our stories, is really about the power of young people to change their environments, to change communities, and also the power of storytelling. Because when I had the opportunity to see myself reflected in books, I was able to then stand up to my teacher, to have the words to talk to my mom, to feel confident enough that I could do something about it. And that was because I had read books about Black girls as future presidents, as models, as architects, as astronauts. I saw no limits on who I could be. So I started in this sort of era in 2015 and 2016 collecting and donating books. Now it is 2024 and I have collected 15,000 books with Black girls as the main character. I have a free online resource guide I will actually find the link and put it in the chat. But it's at grassrootscommunityfoundation.org that has a list of 1,000 of the titles. I just put it in the chat there. So for anyone out there that says, hey, these books aren't out there, we actually are able to not only provide resources to the stories that, reflect my experience, but really say that there are a multitude of experiences and types of stories we can tell about Black women and girls. So some of the other ways that my project has been able to expand is authoring a book called Marley Dias Gets It Done, and So Can You in 2018, about the ways that caregivers, librarians, educators, and kids can work together to create these projects and really no longer view social action as this kind of big responsibility and this big undertaking to, change everything and be a superhero, but really that ordinary people have this amazing ability to speak their truth, to do their research, to engage with others and ask for help and do amazing things in the world. And it's not actually an incredibly optimistic thought. It's actually how kind of greatness exists. And all the people we celebrate, whether it's accomplished writers or activists or whomever, didn't dream of themselves as these people. So especially for you all as folks on this, like listening to me and all the people like Rock the Vote folks and all of us as older people that are in the world doing these things, all of us are just following our love for that unique combination of our passion and our frustration. So some of the recommendations I have for supporting getting involved in youth organizing is following that passion and frustration model and making sure that as you look around in your communities, no issue is too small. Whether it's a lack of sidewalks, whether it's poor school lunches, whether it's not seeing your story reflected in the books you're reading, whether it's climate issues, you have the right to imagine a better future for yourself at any time, at any place, and you always have the right to change your mind. You can change your circumstances by doing that work. So some of the strategies that we can also use when we get to this point of saying, hey, I have actually identified a problem, but I don't know how we've gotten to this place, is through books and through reading and through history. So the Grassroots Community Foundation, my mom runs this organization and is providing, of course, is like attached to the link where you can find my resource guide, also has these online courses now called Civics in Color, where every day it is academics, state elected officials, professors, nonprofit executives, people that are all involved in the world of how our United States political system coming to be, taking us day by day through civic education and learning about social problems and doing things like that. So I share resources like this on my social media. I encourage you all to check it out, but really being the person that provides that tells stories, tells unique, important historical stories to others. So when you find something interesting about an ordinary person that did a cool thing in 2024 or in 1924 or in 1824, it probably still matters today. And I think we all ultimately as young people underestimate the power of seeing the people who have come before us that have done the work. Because times have been harder, the future has been bleaker, we've experienced really hard days before, and particularly for Black women and girls and for kids of color, we stand on the shoulders of people that have achieved so much against such worse odds. So let's have the hope, let's have the encouragement, and let's use storytelling and use the unique combination of our passions and our frustrations to make change. So thank you guys so much.
That was so beautiful, Marley. Thank you for being here. I love how you were able to find something you were passionate about and like stories and reading and create change with that.
Absolutely. And the idea is that your passion can also change. Like, as for those of you that are maybe in high school or in middle school, you get this idea that if you want to be a doctor, you have to always want to be a doctor and decide and commit to these things. But you get the flexibility of having the things you want to do professionally and the things you want to do in your life is separate things. Like, you can explore all these ideas. Never take something that you won't be able to necessarily get like a degree with or a job with as something that's not worth pursuing because you care about it deeply. It's really important that we have the balance of fueling ourselves and fueling our communities and fueling our careers.
Thank you. Thank you. Please, if anyone has questions for Marley, put them in the chat once again. All right. Now I'd love to invite everyone on our panel to explore critical questions that can help us all support young people in organizing and movement making. My first question is, what are your recommendations for supporting young people as they get started in organizing?
I can hop in. I think that one of the first things is almost in every community, there's local grassroots community organizations that exist. And so to Marley's point, where sometimes it can feel overwhelming, it's highly likely that there's a group of like-minded folks in your community that have built the infrastructure to get engaged. And so, like even just simple Google searches and understanding the issues you care about and looking into organizations that also care about those same issues. And then taking a first step to attend a meeting or go out to an action and introduce yourself to folks, I think is the very first step to just meeting the community members that are going to support you through this work. Nobody has to do it alone.
I agree with that. Anyone else?
I think she said it beautifully, to be honest. It's like, I think that's right. You don't have to do this alone. There are oftentimes people and organizations in your community that even if you have your own passion project, that you can get support and community through those organizations, even if that's not necessarily like everything that they do.
Agreed. All right, and here's another question for you all. Organizing takes a lot of effort and change happens over time. What strategies help young people navigate the ups and downs of the journey?
I have some tips. I think that one thing that can help us, like I spoke a little bit before, is just sometimes like using documentaries and YouTube and like get into the rabbit holes of all the really cool young women and young people that can motivate us forward. So for me, I started 1000 Black Girl Books when I was 10, and it really started to pick up steam. And when I was going into high school, I didn't feel very motivated towards my cause. I was feeling like I've collected a bunch of books, but like things are not changing at the speed I want them to. Like I felt very old, at 14, I felt I had grays. But I was able to learn about this amazing woman named Augusta Baker, who worked at the New York Public Library and actually began like kind of the children's services to collect bibliographies with books about Black kids. So I was able to go online, like learn about her, watch videos of her, and be like, wow, like if this librarian who has, of course she is recognized within this space, but deserves so much more acclaim for the work she did, was able to go 35 years making this way. Why can't I, as like a 14-year-old who gets to, make fun videos and go to cool places talking about books, get to, push forward? So one way we can combat that is by really celebrating other people in our communities that are doing the work and sometimes being their best ally instead of like us being the leader. Like you don't always have to be the face of something to be a really important part of it.
I don't want to, that ended so well that I don't want to say the thing, but I think, I think one of the things that you're touching on is like, so many times we hear about the like law that passed or the thing that was done, but we don't hear about the decades or years of work that went into it, right? And so I do think, as Marley was saying, is like digging into the history about it. Like as I mentioned, the 18-year-olds got the right to vote in 1972, and a lot of people think it actually started because of Vietnam. It started because of the World War II. That's World War I and World War II is when that actually started. So it took decades for that to happen. And I think that's important to keep in mind because it's so easy to be like, oh, I didn't get this thing done in a year and I'm a failure, right? And it's like, no, like it's all about moving. I use a lot of like running analogies. It's a marathon. And if you can just like make sure, it's going to be like 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing. As long as you're making the progress over time, then you're getting that much closer to your goal.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would add to that is like, because this work is often such the long game and it can feel sometimes like unsurmountable and, like, how do I solve a climate crisis or something? You look at, we're in the middle of election season and the ads are just overwhelming us. But I think through it, relishing and celebrating smaller wins and understanding, that a win isn't just a policy passing, but I know, which we should certainly celebrate when policies that really impact our whole communities are moved. But I know in my organizing career, some of the things that meant the most to me was when I had a really good conversation with a peer or a community member and, they turned out to the next meeting and they brought a friend, so how are we really finding those moments that are really centered on human connection and building a stronger community and celebrating those moments and feeling really good about them.
These were such amazing responses, and I agree with everything you all said. Now we can take a few questions from the chat, and the first one I have is what challenges did you have in your own work, and what are strategies for gaining the most youth to be involved?
One strategy I had during my work was obviously, as all of us, the pandemic was really infected and changed the activism scene, and particularly the racial equity, the conversations around racial equality significantly, um, and sort of brought a lot of the issues to brought a lot of issues to light and created awareness. But then there was this sort of 2021 and 2022 moment of feeling like people were not willing to go deeper than that level of what they maybe had indicated or signified they were interested in doing, and continuing to see so much, whether it's police violence or it's racial legislation, or just genuinely not experiencing like the transformation that we would have hoped. For me, as a person that had been involved in youth activism from like 10 to 16 at that time, I felt like, not in any way that it could be the end of what I was doing, but that like maybe there actually could be, once this is over, more books with like Black kids and characters in school. And now book banning is one of the number one issues in our country that's not being talked about because of so many other issues. So like there is, I mean, for all of us, I'm sure, like if you ask any person in the organizing nonprofit space, like, and ask them about the pandemic, they can give you a million reasons as to why it was impactful for them personally and professionally. But it's really this kind of 2020 to 2022 shift of caring a lot about the issues that I had been so dedicated to, and then losing a lot of support, but also like, and then also people not being willing to go to the next level of support and actually working to change things was really hard. But one way I changed that was by using like the arts and music and creative stuff outside of the political sort of lens to do this work. So at school, I'm a junior at Harvard. I study sociology and African American studies, and I'm one of the co-directors of the Black Arts Collective there. So at the Black Arts Collective, even though this is not something I do that like gets listed in my bio or is like always seen as like the most flashy thing I do, but I spend time with 40 Black students at Harvard that we plan like affinity and art related events to heal from us losing our first Black president, or dealing with global crises and protests at our school. Like now I'm able to create these affinity spaces with my true friends, my peers, meet new people. And even if it isn't as big as, national campaigns about racism that we saw in 2020 and 2021, I'm making real change in the lives of Black Harvard students that are now choosing to pursue art over like an economics or a consulting career that they didn't want to do. So like that's a win. Even if it's not maybe as many emails or as many calls as I was getting in those times, like I'm actually helping people, and they're my friends. So I really encourage people to use their educational environments and like never consider like the idea of like having a club or an org or a weekly meeting like to not be genuinely transformative for someone's, life, or like what you can do in your community. It really has made my experience at Harvard like something I will miss 10 times more.
I agree. Here's another question from the chat. When motivating youth, how do you support young people to be incentivized beyond their heartfelt passion for the work?
That's a great question. I'm going to kind of tie that question also to the previous question around like challenges. So, organizing, if you've ever been an organizer or engaged in your community, you've probably experienced heartbreak, and shed a lot of tears. And I certainly have, too many times to count. And I'll say, one of the moments, I've had multiple moments, and, when I was organizing locally here in Albuquerque. And, one of the times really that has stuck with me even to this day is, the effort we put into, the same conversation that's happening now was happening 15, 20 years ago around, school shootings, police in schools, arming school guards, the school environment in general. And a group of young people in Albuquerque, we're supporting them to organize to not have their school guards armed. And just did all the things. If you read the Power to Win framework, did many of the things in the Power to Win framework that were supposedly like effective community organizing strategies. Right? We reached out, talked to not just students but administrators. Sent out mailers, did our power analysis, knew who where the votes were, who we needed to send mailers out in the community to school board members to turn out their community members. and designed those mailers together, and printed them ourselves, and all of the beautiful things that we thought were going to really get the vote in our direction. And as we sat in that room and hundreds of community members turned out and just watched elected officials not even look up from their computers, it was really disheartening, and certainly heartbreaking. And I can say that there were countless times, sitting in front of decision makers in which our voices weren't heard or weren't listened to. And I think, the ways to move beyond those moments is where the kind of creative strategy comes in around, assessing, okay, why didn't that tactic work? Or what was it about our message that couldn't reach them? Or how can we reach folks in a different way? Or do we need to build a bigger we, right? Do we need to bring in new community members and strengthen our base? And so it's in those conversations that I think can be the most inspirational when organizing for some type of change is the opportunity to be a creative and to experiment and to try something new on. Because, in those moments, it really catapulted us in our organization at that time to think beyond just that one school board meeting to more broadly, how are we looking at our school board and who is represented, to Caroline's point, who's representing our voice, and how do we think about that and look at that differently? So it shifted our whole strategy. And so a whole new vision was born, and that's really exciting.
I think the other thing, building off of both what Monica and Marley said, was one of the things that I do think has been really hard the last couple of years is it feels like there's so much just negative. And so I do think, and that's weighing on people's mental health right now, and it's almost easier, and there's so much information out there and so much misinformation and so much negativity that especially with social media, I think that there is this feeling of just shut down, right? It's easier to not think about those things. And so I do think one of the things that we're looking at, two things. One is reframing and thinking about how we talk about engaging as actually a form of self-care, that it is important to your future well-being to pay attention, right? It doesn't mean you have to be in it 100%, but if you want to feel better, taking action actually does make you feel better. And it's important to changing the things that you want to change. And I think one of the other important elements, which is all about what the organization here is about, and something Marley talked about and what she's doing at Harvard, is leveraging the arts. Arts is healing, right? That's what people use. And so leveraging different forms of art and communication and relationships to actually further your goal too. Yeah, it's a way to communicate really complex things, right? And sometimes there aren't words, but there's a song or there's a piece of art or something that can better describe or make you feel something.
This was all well said. That will be our last question from the chat. So let's give a big thanks to our panelists and to the chat questions. Big thanks to you all. So before we transition to the breakout rooms, can everyone please answer a quick poll? And the poll should be popping up right now. All right. All right, when you have answered that, we will now be transitioning into our breakout sessions. The groups will be randomly assigned, and there will be a facilitator in your breakout room to help the conversation flow. In the breakout session, we'd like everyone to do 3 things. And there will be a slide on this, so we can give you a visual representation of what to do. It will mostly be conversation, but in the breakout session, we'd like everyone to do these things. First, introduce yourself. Share one thing that is resonating with you, and share one action you will take to support young people in your community. If it is helpful, You can even think about what you might stop doing, start doing, and continue to do to help young people organize. And here's this, the instructions right now on the screen that you can see. So I can go over them one more time. Make sure you introduce yourself so we can all know you. Share one thing that is resonating with you, and share one action you'll take to support young people in your community. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had engaging conversations in your groups, and I hope that everyone came up with one action item that you can do to bring power of what we discussed today back to your community. If you can read them, I see a lot of them are talking about little wins. That's sweet. All right.
Generational divide. I see that. Yeah. Yeah. Listening to youth. I think that's a big, I'm seeing that. Yeah. Listening to youth and letting them lead, not assuming that you know what they need.
Yeah, I can build off that a little bit. I mean, it's so interesting, right, to come out of an era in which, young people really had to. I grew up in the era in which youth organizing was really created, and like having to carve a space for ourselves. And now, and not wanting to be tokenized, and that's still true, right? In this moment, nobody wants to be tokenized, and particularly young people. But the importance of not going too far within that, because it actually takes whole communities. So the intergenerational nature of this work is really important to, I think, continue to value and uphold. So I'm glad that was some of the conversation that was happening.
All right, and I'm going to ask again, does anyone else want to add from what their groups have discussed? Anyone from the audience?
I would just say, I think the theme was just how important it was. Sorry, I'll put my video on. How important it was to uplift the voices of the youth. Like, that's like the number one mission, and like the way that you can do it. And like, I just see like through music and arts, like that, if music and arts will give them the courage to use that voice, like use that. So I was like hearing that theme throughout our conversation and just throughout the day today. Just this great conversation.
All right, thank you. Great insights, everyone. I want to thank you all for being with us today. And as we close, I'm going to give a special thanks to our speakers and our panelists. Just a big thanks to everyone. All right. As we close, don't miss our next town hall on October 24th, where we will discuss impactful places and spaces through creative youth development, or CYD. Check our website and follow us on Instagram for more content and updates. Please reply to our follow-up survey so your insights guide our planning for future events. Also, on our website, our new open mic is full of music and videos from young people across the country. Music is a powerful tool to advocate for change, so to close us out, here's a video from my group, the Real Young Prodigies, called The Crown Remix, which helped pass the Crown Act in 2019. Enjoy and remember to take action. Change depends on all of us. We are the strongest when we move together. And remember to vote. Thank you all.
Down to the floor, edges laid, I know you know. Got our puffs, got our bows. It's more than a movement, yo. We pushing P, that's policy. You see us when we on TV. No discrimination in our city, that's on Prodigy.
Excuse me. What is this? These bonnets, and it's ratchet and it's ghetto. You guys have been seen in public wearing these, patting your heads. You're guilty.